Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Exploring Ancestral Wisdom and Healing. This is Denise King Francisco. Welcome to the Radio and Media Network here at the Temple Within. And for those of you that are wondering, is the chat room going to be open this evening? It is. Hey, Holly Hagan. Good to see you in the chat already. I'd like to introduce my co-host of this new show, David, also known as Cad Sterken. Hey, Dave.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight.
And joining Cad and I is Nicole Fix. Hi, Nicole.
Hi. Great to be here.
It's good to have you here. As we're opening up the chat room, Cad, would you take a moment just to every time we meet, every month we meet to do the show, and we always talk a little bit beforehand and review where we've been and talk about where we're going. Would you talk for just a moment about what it is we're going to talk about tonight?
Sure. Thanks again for all of you for joining us. As you know, we've been talking a little bit about ancestral wisdom and healing and why it might be important in our lives. And as we were talking about our show this evening, just previous to signing on, we were talking about how and why our ancestors might be important to us, as well as how do we actually get in touch with them to actually invite them into our lives to be part of our own healing, to be part of our everyday lives, as well as and how do we do that safely? That's another aspect of that we need to consider, as well as just the continued work that we want to do with our ancestors in relationship to their healing as well as our healing. So that's a little bit of summary of what we're planning to do tonight.
I like that. It's exciting. I love talking about this topic, and I feel as though it's a topic that a lot of people right now are engaged in for a lot of reasons. And Nicole, before we started the show, you asked if I might talk for just a moment about why it is in the West that this topic is really predominant right now, and why we, really generally in looking at the scope of ancestral knowledge and knowing who we are, we seem to be lacking that here in the West. And I believe first and foremost, part of the reason for that is because, other than the Native American people, the indigenous First Nations people here of the Americas, the rest of us have a fair share, or exclusively, our people were immigrants to this country. And as immigrants, many of our relatives left their homeland, wherever it happened to be, for a variety of reasons. Maybe it was war, maybe it was famine. There are so many reasons why people came this way, for opportunity, etc. And for many people, I believe it was also an opportunity to begin again and to become someone new. So if they were leaving troubles behind, they tried to do just that. They left troubles behind and they changed their last name perhaps at Ellis Island, or maybe they were given a different last name or a way of pronouncing it at Ellis Island. And for others, escaping a criminal past or what have you, an opportunity to completely change things up. And sadly, for many who came to this country, there was, for some, a sense of shame or embarrassment about where they were coming from, why they were coming from there, and who they were. So all in all, it was really an opportunity to begin again. And for some, first and foremost, the opportunity to become an American, which meant for many people learning to speak the English language, meant that they didn't speak the old language any longer. And therefore they didn't sing the old songs and they didn't tell the old stories. And I feel now, as a group of people here on Turtle Island, as the ancestors of immigrants, and sometimes ancestors of both indigenous people and immigrants. Now we're realizing that the disconnect from our ancestry has had an effect on generations. And, we talked about that a little bit last month, Nicole, when we were together. And when we began the show tonight, behind the scenes, you mentioned this idea of disconnection, and that one of the benefits of connecting to ancestors is the potential for healing.
Yeah. One thing, too, that I think is important to bring up is that when we're talking about working with the ancestors, some people get the idea that we're talking about ancestor worship. And I think it's important to identify or to, talk about that. Really, we're not talking about worshiping our ancestors as much as venerating them. And what do I mean by that? I think veneration of our ancestors means that we recognize that they still have an important part of our lives, and that we still want to honor them, honor the wisdom that they had, honor the knowledge that they might still provide for us. And so it's not that we're, I think one of the things that happened when, at least this is my opinion, when we saw a lot of people in Europe being killed because they were pagan, they were didn't worship the God of the at the time that the Catholic Church was portraying as the highest God during the Holy Wars. And so a lot of people, I think, lost that wisdom because they were killed, and as a result of that, for generations after that, that wisdom was lost. And so I think, it's important to recognize that just we're not talking about having an altar in our home where we're sitting there and worshiping the ancestors. What we are doing is we are identifying that they're still an important part of our life and that I can gain wisdom from them yet.
Mm-hmm. What would you add to that, Nicole? That was beautiful. Thank you, Kat.
That was, I guess that just reminds me, and we talked about this a bit on the last show, but just, we inherit from our ancestors their stress response. And, our brains are genetically wired to remember mostly the negative things because that's what keeps us going evolutionary-wise. But it's because of their struggles and what they've gone through that have really allowed us to continue on in our family. Yeah, a lot of things are not so pretty, and I think some of those things are really coming up now for healing. But if we can kind of reframe how we look at it, for those of us who are wanting to do that, and at a place of readiness for that, it's allowing it's seeing the gifts through the struggle.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right, and go ahead, Cam.
Well, the other thing I was just thinking about as well is that sometimes our perception is also changed by the way that media might look at working with the dead or with spirits. Movies portray oftentimes the spiritual realm in a very negative way. You have these scary creatures that are chasing you around that are going to hurt you or things like that. And I think it's important again to distinguish that that's not what we're talking about here, and that we're talking about having that really friendly relationship with the ancestors that we work with.
Yes. Well, and practically speaking, our ancestors are in our blood and in our bones. And their memories, their looks, their preferences, their experiences, their loves, their joys are in our blood and in our bones. You know, this afternoon, my daughter Elise gave me one of those, "Mom, can you please come over here? I need help with the baby" phone calls. And so I, put on my Grammy hat and over I went with the fixings to make, tomato soup and grilled cheese sandwiches, because I figured if those were comfort food for me, right, they still would be for her. And, just exchanging information with Elise about who she was as a baby, her preferences as a baby. And clearly, my grandson is the spitting image of his mother. He is her mini-me. And talking about generational patterns, we got on the subject of generational patterning. And so when we talk about working with our ancestors, honestly, a large part of it isn't about, as you say, worshiping them. It's not any of that. It's coming to terms with who they are within us and how we reflect them. And their experiences in this lifetime, and honoring their experiences, good, bad, or indifferent. I think there's a lot of healing in that.
Yeah. One of the other things that I've been thinking about is, we consider that our ancestors are oftentimes our bloodline, but I wonder as well, though, the Lakota tribe uses the term Matakwiyase, we are all related.
Yes.
And I wonder about how that refers to things that are not human. So, because I consider nature, animals, things like that, my brothers and sisters, and maybe this is a whole other radio show, but are they our relation as well?
Oh, I like that. I believe they are.
Yeah, and I believe that they impact us and can impact us every day, as again we invite them into our lives.
How do you feel about that, Nicole?
Yeah, I mean, it's taking me pause, but I have a cat who's 21 years old, and I've had her since I was a teenager, and she is like such a love of my life, and I hope that, when the day comes, that she continues to be with me. Her spirit will always be part of me. So yeah, I haven't really thought about that, but definitely.
Mm-hmm. I like that we have a psychotherapist on the team here that agrees that we could also be, feel related to, or that we are related to every living thing. And I believe that more of psychology and the medical world is coming to some of those same conclusions. I mean, how do you feel about that, Nicole? Because you are a therapist.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that, everyone is kind of immersing in this ancestral time of like awakening in some way. Mm-hmm. And I can't help but thinking of, the benefits for us, clearly what we've been talking about, but gosh, the benefits for those who, our loved ones who've passed away, who are wanting healing for their family as well. The blessings aren't just ours to hold, especially when we're taking on patterns that really aren't ours to take on. So thinking about just, like what I can do, what I might be going through, through a suffering or a moment or a joy too, that affects my daughter, and then it's going to affect her children and their children. And, if I were to pass away and see this all kind of happening and unfolding, you bet your bottom dollar I'm going to want to see a healing come of that. So just as we kind of think about, how come this is all happening now in the West, so it's such a big time. I mean, I can't, we can't leave out just the emphasis on, our ancestors are pushing for this too.
I agree
the
with
other
that.
side.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A lot of times, when I'm with, well, you both know Barbara and Del Marie and Della and Cheryl Noisy Hawk. You know all of my sisters out there from Indian country. And sometimes we get, sitting around the table eating Del Marie's fry bread or Indian tacos, we can get on the subject of why so many non-Native people are enamored with Native American spirituality. And I happen to believe that so many people are enamored with Native American spirituality because it's so reminiscent of spirituality that considers our connection to every living thing that runs throughout all indigenous people. How do you feel about that, Cad?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And, one of the things I think is, as the veil is getting thinner between the two worlds, is that our ancestors are wanting to have that relationship with us because they have within their bones knowledge and wisdom that they want to pass on to us. That's important, I think, for us in this time in history, for us to have access to. And so, I think it's almost going both ways between the veil right now. We have an interest in, I think that they very much have an interest with us, with what we are doing and what they're seeing going on in our world, and they're probably saying, "Well, I can help you with this," and just being open to having that kind of interchange with them, and how do you have that interchange? I think is great.
Mm-hmm. Something that you alluded to, both of you, a little bit ago is the idea of who qualifies as an ancestor. Because if we're going to talk this evening about how our ancestors can come to us in our dreams, how they sometimes visit us from their home in spirit, and anyone who knows me knows that is, one of the things that I came into this lifetime with is the ability to see people who are in spirit, as well as other beings that dwell there. And, growing up Catholic, that was very much accepted, at least, in the churches that I went to and the home that I grew up in. That wasn't anything frightening. It wasn't anything scary. Understood, but nobody said this is a bad thing ever, which was a great blessing. But let's talk about for a moment that, well, I'll just use my experience of my adoptive relatives out in South Dakota. There have been times in my dream times that my brother-in-law Buzz, who you both know and love, he passed away, almost 6 years now. There are times when Buzz will come to me in my dreams, and he doesn't feel as though he's a friend. He feels as though he is a relative. He's my brother-in-law. And it doesn't feel much different than when my father comes to me in my dreams. I believe that sometimes the bond of love that we experience here on this earth plane qualifies in making a relative much more deeply a relative. And I think that that's also inclusive, or they should be included. How do you both feel about that?
Yeah, being adopted, one of the things is I was starting to look at ancestral work, was that oftentimes those folks that were leading the discussion were talking about your blood ancestors. And, I would raise my hand and say, well, I'm adopted. I don't know a lot of my blood ancestors. And then what they would talk about is that, indeed, your adopted family become your ancestor, are very much a part of your ancestral group. Mm-hmm. Because, again, I think, as you just so aptly pointed out, it's the relationship, the love that you have extended to each other, mm-hmm. that forms that bond. And then, again, I have very close friends that I would probably consider family.
Right.
That I believe, again, would be, if they would pass on before me, they would be someone that I would want to connect with as someone who can be helpful to me in this world. So, yeah, I mean, probably there can be that, the word ancestor probably maybe we've defined it a little too narrowly culturally, because I think it extends way beyond just the bonds of blood and bone and things like that. So.
Mm-hmm. Nicole, what would you add to that as a therapist? Because I know that there are people listening this evening who are adopted. They may not know, other than, they've been told that they are such and such. From a therapist standpoint, what about the bonds of love as they are created between people who are not blood related?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, trauma can happen in a relationship, but healing can also happen in a relationship. So that love that is created is also creating a ripple effect, and if we're looking at, memories are stored through our emotions, and through our sensations in our body, and it's, certain things that can turn those on or off. So, and that's through experiences as well. So, yeah, and I just think if anything, really joy-filled or traumatic were to happen with a friend involved, that's certainly going to store a memory within us and within our DNA, essentially.
And that's exactly where I wanted to go with that, is because when we have a memory, it's stored within our blood and our bones. And so for myself, I think about my dad, the Sarge, and, my world very much intertwined with him, and I still quote him almost daily. And so, ancestrally speaking, my memories of him as the man who raised me will go and continue on through generations as a father figure.
Yeah, his influence in your life has directly influenced, your upbringing of your children, and now the upbringing of their children, so
right.
Absolutely that.
And, you've all met my other son, Colton. I call him my son from another mother, and he calls me Mom. And, whenever I see him, when he leaves, I love you, Mom. And so I wanted to bring that up before we went any further, because, ancestor by blood and bone is ancestral lineage. And then there are ancestors that are created by bonds of love.
Yes. Yep.
So for those of you that are listening, the discussion is for everyone this evening. And the bonds of love, that we share with our furry and feathered family members as well. Those are very important, because those also become contained within our ancestral memories of our lifetime. So let's move on to connecting with our ancestors and how they connect with us. Most oftentimes people have their first experience of that when someone is either getting ready to pass away or they have passed on. There can be a visitation from an ancestor. And for many, it's the first time they've ever had such an experience. It can be shocking. They can doubt themselves. They may call Nicole Fix and say, I think I may be having a breakdown. Can you help me with this? Kat, you are a death midwife, and you are certified as one. Have you, in your training or in your experience as a nurse practitioner, your decades of experience as a nurse practitioner at the hospital, have you ever encountered someone who is preparing to pass having a visitation from an ancestor?
Yes. So one of the things, some of the work that I used to do was I worked with oncology patients, specifically hospice patients. And it's not, in my experience, it's not unusual as they are getting closer and closer to death, that the veil gets thinner and thinner, and oftentimes they will say that they see their mom or their dad or maybe a child that's passed on. It's not unusual at all, but there is a individual there to help them on that journey as they move from this world to the next. And it's interesting. I remember reading a story one time about this little oncology boy that the doctor had come to visit him, and when he closed his door after he left, the child said, no, don't close the door, don't close the door. And he goes, why? He said, St. Peter's coming down the hall, and he's looking for my room. If you close the door, he won't be able to find me.
Oh, wow.
So, it's those kind of very kind of mystical experiences that people, as like I said, as they're getting closer and closer to death, that the veil is getting thinner. It's not unusual for them to see a family member, and for some families that freaks them out. It's not family members that are kind of surrounding the bed that freaks them out. In my experience, if you just kind of go with it and just say, to the family member, I'm glad that you're seeing that person. Just, encourage them to, continue to have that encounter. Some people will see angels, other things, but most of my experience is that patients will see a family member that's passed on before them and coming to help them. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Nicole, what has your experience ever been with this subject?
I just keep thinking of, it was like last April, and I swear my doorbell rang in the middle of the night. And my neighbor at the time was pregnant, and she was due in like a couple of weeks, and they had kind of said, if you go into labor, you can ring the doorbell, and we'll watch your daughter if you have to go off to the hospital or something. And no one was around. And then as I'm kind of like, I think I started journaling or something, and I remembered that my grandmother had passed like 2 years to the day. And so I just felt, I don't know, I felt like she was at least making her role known in my life, which was really a beautiful gift. And she's come to me in my dream time too. And then I think about the people that I know who have crossed over, like Dave's mom when she passed away. They're not really lucid, and the things that they're seeing or sharing just don't really make sense, but that there's something so much more, mystical and magical that's happening, that really, it defies a lot of our logic, and we can easily rationalize in some way, but for those of us that really are in tune and open, we know that there's so much more happening in those moments.
Yeah, and it's been interesting because there have been times where, like, I'm in the hospital setting with a patient who's dying, and maybe a physician's in there with them, and the patient's sharing what they've seen. It's always interesting how medical science, I think, tries to disavow those experiences by saying things like, this is just a normal part of the dying experience. They're not getting enough oxygen to their brain, so they're seeing things and stuff like that. And like, yeah, they're seeing things, but it's not because they don't have oxygen in their brain. It's actually experiencing. So yeah, it's interesting how we want to kind of explain that away. Because again, I think it's because people are fearful of death, are fearful of those mystical, spiritual experiences. Because again, I think we have the idea that those are not good experiences because of what we've either seen in the media or seen on TV. Rather than making it the beautiful experience that it is. And
it's also part of what we have unlearned here in the West.
Yep.
I travel around the world. Cad, you've taken to traveling with me around the world. And there isn't a place around the world that I have visited, from Egypt to Ireland to England, anywhere in between, where the conversation about ancestors is frightening, or visitations from ancestors who have passed is frightening, or visitations from ancestors in dreams is frightening. It is so still part and parcel of so many cultures outside of the parameters of the United States, because that's part of the ancestral blessings that sometimes were purposefully left, and those that first colonized the United States were very puritanical.
Yeah, absolutely.
In their religious beliefs, and those puritanical beliefs, in some places, are still very firmly planted. But when we travel back in time and when we visit the land of our ancestors, where the ancestral stories and spirituality are still very much alive, none of this is new information. It's, well, yeah, that's old, stale information. Nicole, I know that you've traveled around the world, and, France, you love France. This conversation is not anything that is surprising. It's welcomed. It's part of the family tradition and teachings that we talk about ancestral visitations, after they pass, because frankly, the other thing we really don't do a very good job of here in the West, and I think we're beginning to really understand that, is even preparing somebody to die.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
We may take care of their bodily needs so they're not in physical pain. Recently, within the last year and a half, I have an increase in clients from professions, from doctors to attorneys to bricklayers, who I work with. I actually coach them through the process of dying and prepare them for things like this and help them pick up stones and talk about life experiences and, their perception of what it's going to be like when they pass, and which gives me hope that the tide of conversation is changing. But I think that there is so much that has either been purposefully unlearned or just unlearned because people were trying to just live, that we're starting to want to learn again.
Yes.
How does that feel to you?
Well, there's been such a fear associated with it, when it's actually this really beautiful, peaceful experience that, if we can prepare ourselves for, I would look at it from the reflections on one's life, the joys, the failures, everything in between, and preparing, emotionally for that crossover, but letting go of some of that fear of unknown, where you come in and help, prepare for, what's happening within the transition and after. And I know you're doing these psychological aspects as well. But it takes away the fear and the anxiety and the cover up, of like, hush, hush, don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and one of the things that is interesting that I discovered as I was starting to do this work a little bit more, in talking about kind of our losses in the West in relationship to ancestor work, was I could not really go beyond a first generation of remembering grandparents' names. And one of the things I've been more challenged with now is really trying to look at, back maybe 6 generations. Can I name the parents? Can I name my grandmother's 6 generations back? Can I name my grandfather's 6 generations back? And that's been challenging for me. It's not something that we in the West, I think, really emphasize. It's we don't know who our grandparents are, but do we know much about our great-great-grandparents and back, even more generations? So, that's another difference that I think that that we're challenged with here in the West. Yeah.
When I was preparing for this evening, I had created last week a photo collage of 5 generations of women from my mother's side of the family, and on my father's side, 5 generations of men, including my grandson. And I have the collage of both of those sitting in front of me this evening. And Cad, you were there when Todd and I did the hand fasting at Inishfallen Island in Ireland. And it was the first time, I've been married twice, and Todd and I, it seems we get remarried wherever we go. But this time, Amantha asked if we might like to have a hand fasting ceremony. And it was the first time that my ancestors on my mother's side were included in the ceremony. And both of you know Lily. And when Amantha asked her the question, who is this woman that's come to this ceremony? Who have you brought? And she announced she's the daughter of Cornelia Eckert, the granddaughter of Gesine Erfman, the great-granddaughter of Hendrika Spohl. And you remember the wind kicked up there on the island. And at the same time, the same question, you stood up for Todd. And you were asked, who is this man that you've brought? Who is he? And then you announced all of those generations back on behalf of Todd's father's people.
Right.
It was magical. The energy of calling or inviting or acknowledging the ancestors in that old ceremony, in that ancient island of learning, was spectacular.
Yeah, I thought about that just in relationship to the wedding ceremonies that we have now in our culture, where there's just a very quick minute where the minister asked who gives this bride away to this man, and the parents say the mother and I, and that's all that's ever said.
Yes.
Versus, as you said, how powerful it was to hear the generations of the grandfathers and the grandmothers that were coming to this place to witness this. Yeah, it was very magical. Not
something that you would see in a wedding typically here in the United States.
No, but I think it again speaks to the fact that we've lost those traditions.
Yes.
I think that when you talk about kind of losing that ancestral part, the things that we oftentimes lose are the language, the traditions, the music. Those are the things that I think our ancestors are asking us to bring back. And to just, that was just a very simple thing, but at your ceremony, but it was so powerful to hear all of those names. I would love to see more ceremonies that included that information. Absolutely.
Yeah. Nicole, I know that you're vastly attracted to France, and look at your daughter's name, right? That beautiful French name. And you've been to France. You studied in France. Does it feel ancestral to you?
It feels like it's in my bones. So I am looking forward to getting the results of my Ancestry.com test to see, because as far as I know, it's not in anyone's blood yet.
Right.
So we'll see if it's in mine.
There's been a whole lot of surprises happening for folks with participating at Ancestry.com and 23andMe and all of those providers. When we're listening to the voice of our ancestors, whether, blowing in the winds there at Inishfallen Island, or we go to France and we feel like we're at home, or we're in the Stonehenges there in Ireland, we can hear the voice of our ancestors. We can hear them in our dreams, and sometimes we're visited by them. Sometimes we're not. And are there ways in which we can provide a space to be able to hear them more clearly? Nicole, how do you feel about inviting ancestors to be more fully present with us?
I think it can be very healing. I am a fan of using the dream time, the time when we're sleeping, as a way to connect. But then again, back to that readiness of, there's got to be like this emotional readiness for what you're receiving, and asking that it be done in love and only of the highest good, to ensure that there is a boundary in place as well, just for your protection.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that there can be so much healing. And we have these questions that we don't know the answer to. We may never know the answer to, but our blood, our bones, they do know.
Mm-hmm.
And so by calling on, that lineage, by the intuition, the DNA, everything at play, that it will come through, our dream time, powerful dreams, just strong, a resonance within us that just really, feels like this soul reconnaissance.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that a lot of people, when they get their DNA results back and they find out that they're Yugoslavian or Polish, or gee, they never knew they were Russian or maybe Irish, and they're so happy schmappy to find out that they're African or Venezuelan. And they find this out, and so many times they just want to dive right into, I want to hear the music, I want to hear the mythology, I want to know the stories, I want to connect with those ancestors, I want to know more, I want to hear from them. There are good ways of going about that. There are some that are kind of sketchy ways of going about that. Cad, from your perspective, you're a multifaceted man as well. You're a nurse practitioner, you're a shaman, which I so appreciate, and you are a death midwife. If somebody said to you, Cad, I just got my results, I found out that I'm Scottish and I'm Jewish from Israel, and I want to tap into all of that. How do I begin to tap into the wisdom within me, and how do I reach out to the ancestors so that they can inspire me?
Sure. Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, and we've stated this over and over again, I think already is, kind of that first step is getting your DNA tested, either through 23andMe, Ancestry.com. But then, so one part of my practice is to actually call on the ancestors. And it doesn't necessarily have to be calling them by name. Some folks feel very strongly that you can call them by name. One of the challenges, I think, when you're inviting ancestors in is you want to make sure that the ancestors that you're inviting in are well ancestors. Mm-hmm. So they don't have, they're not going to be bringing you bad juju. Mm-hmm. Or the shining ones, the bright ones. Mm-hmm. And so a way that I do it, one of the ways that I was taught is I usually will say, I'll just give you an example. So I would start by just lighting a candle and calling and just saying ancestors, ancestors, ancestors. Ancestors on my grandmother's side, I welcome you here. Well and shining ancestors. Ancestors on my grandfather's side, the well and shining ones. I ask for your help. I ask for your assistance as I go through my day. One of the things I think that is an important part of that is then that you pause. Because one of the things I think that oftentimes happens is that we call on our ancestors, we ask them for what we want, or maybe what we're seeking from them, but then we really don't give them the chance to talk with us, to have that conversation with us. It's kind of like, when you pray, is it best to just regurgitate all that we want up to the heavens, or do we need to also pause and listen? Because I think it's in those quiet times that oftentimes they will talk to us. But it is important, and I remember you pointed out in the last radio show that your altar had on it just like earth items, or items that reminded you of a particular a place of your ancestry. And you talked a little bit about photos. One of the things that I think people get really excited about this, and then they go and put up a lot of photos of their ancestors, either on an altar or other spaces in their homes. One of the things that I think is important to remember is that photos can be doorways, portals, actually. And if you have an unwell ancestor, and you potentially put that unwell ancestor's picture out, you may be, and then you're calling on your ancestors, you may actually be inviting some not so good energies into your home. So I think it's very important to remember, and that's why I appreciated your comments about you not having particular pictures on your altar, but just objects, because those objects are a great remembrance of the place where you came from. And I don't see them as much as of a portal as I do a photo. The other thing is, kind of the ideas of where do you put an altar. And generally, the recommendation for putting an ancestral altar up is not to have it in your bedroom, because that altar is going to hold energy, and you don't necessarily want spiritual energies moving around in your bedroom when you're trying to sleep at night.
Right.
And maybe we should, at some point we'll do a show. One of the shows could talk about the altar and some of the things that we would recommend, but it's building a relationship with them, like it is building a relationship with anybody else. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. You have to continue to build that relationship kind of every day, or every other day, however you want to do it. But acknowledging their presence in your life. I believe that our ancestors, again, are here to protect us, as well as to provide us with things that might be really helpful to our lives and help us to be better people. So,
I like that. Nicole, if somebody were to say to you, Nicole, I'm an adopted person and I just found out my ancestry and I really want to connect. But I don't know them. I just know what I know. I know now that I am Mexican, or I'm Mexican and I'm Czechoslovakian, and I just don't know how to connect. I don't have names. As a therapist, what might you say to somebody with regard to connecting?
I guess it would be wanting to ensure that the boundaries were intact of, either, of calling on, the most, I think you've talked about just calling on the most ancient, the most illuminated, loving, kind, benevolent ancestors of your lineage, ensuring that those parameters were in place, asking God, Creator, whatever, to oversee the connection, to ensure that that's what comes through, and ask for, whatever questions may be on one's mind of, give me guidance in as far as, if you're wanting to connect with someone, like the language, the music, the traditions, or connect something of, why do I always do this? Or what should I do about this? Getting really kind of crystal clear about intentions. And asking, a specific question. I would certainly want to start out with just like one simple question. Because if we throw too much out there, then it's hard to like organize, right?
Right.
So, and I am a fan too of asking for like an unmistakable sign. You could be specific about what that sign is, but then opening to what an unmistakable sign may be that they're with you. Just if you're needing that, like reassurance that this isn't something you're all making up in your head.
I like that. Oftentimes, if somebody asks me, Denise, what's a great way to just connect? I don't have names. I always say, well, go out, if you have Pandora or Spotify or any of those wonderful providers, and find that music. Fill your home with that music. Absorb the music. Read books. Learn about the mythology. Learn about the history. Learn about the wonderful gifts and talents that come out of Romania or come out of Canada or come out of Indian country. Read about those, embrace those, immerse yourself in them, because I think the more we immerse ourselves in the culture, that also draws our ancestors near to us. It brings them right in, and we begin to feel cozy with the energy of. And, reading the legends and all of those wonderful things, I think is so important as a way to begin. And when it comes to communicating or inviting them in, oftentimes it is in our dreams that they'll visit us, or they'll point us in the right direction of the best book or a piece of music, or they'll have us go visit a place. I remember as a very young girl, and through all of my adulthood, I have a brand new doctor. Her name is Mudri Kakarala. She's an internist at St. Mary's. And she and I were talking, well, it was yesterday, I believe, or the day before yesterday, when I met her for the first time, about this fact that I had recently discovered my biological family and what was that like, and how was I bringing into my life this new information. She said, because, it can cause a lot of stress and anxiety to all of a sudden bring in new people and new conversations. How are you gently bringing your people to you?
One of the other things that I think that I do as well, that I believe is important when you're calling on your ancestors, is to actually introduce yourself and to use your name. So here's how I would do it. I usually start with the grandmother's side, and then do the grandfathers. But I also, because I'm adopted, I add on my adopted family. So I would say, I am David J. Shuringa O'Hara Curtis Sterken. And then if you also have a spiritual name, some people will put their spiritual name on the end of that, because the spirits also know you by that name as well. So it's using your name and then saying grandmothers, grandfathers, and then inviting them to, again, be part of your daily life.
I like that.
I love how, that is nice. I mean, I love that emphasis on like the gentleness. Like, make it gentle and loving and kind, and at a rate that is easy for me to manage.
A gentle submersion or immersion.
And I do think it's important as well to use, if you do know their names, you can acknowledge them as your grandparents or as your grandparents, and because I think that can also help to form a bond. Again, I think making sure that when you're asking that saying, if you are well, grandmother so-and-so, please come and help me, grandmother, to the generation. But I think using their name also is something that helps to draw them to you. So I think knowing, again, that's just not part of our Western culture, and so learning our grandparents' names is a very important thing.
Right. Well, Jesse, what was the outlaw? Jesse James. He's like my sixth cousin. On Donna, I know you're listening. So Jesse James is like our sixth or seventh cousin on Grandma Purdue's side. Now, I might enjoy, maybe a movie about my cousin, but I'm probably not going to call on him for spiritual guidance. Yeah. And I'm probably not going to hang a photo of him in the family room, And you know what I'm saying? So when we honor our ancestors, we honor them. But when we're going to, seek guidance or a bit of intuition or inspire me. Even the word altar can be off-putting to somebody. I grew up Catholic, so altar all day long, right? Yeah. Spirit guides. There's a saint for everything in the world of Catholicism. So spirit guides I grew up with. But Donna just said exactly my question. Exactly. So we're not going to have Jesse James hanging, somewhere in our home, because we want to invite those that are well, because if we truly believe, and I believe that the three of us understand this, that even when we shed our physicality, we are still making our way back to the ancestors. Those that have arrived or are well along their way to the ancestors, we're not intruding upon their path by calling them from their search for wellness or whatever it happens to be. But really addressing those that are well and can help us in a good way. I think that's being responsible on both sides of the veil. And definitely we're about responsibility. So, yeah.
And for me, I have to say, when I started to kind of delve into that was kind of a concept that was very new to me growing up in a Baptist background, because our belief is that when you die, you go to heaven or hell, the idea that our ancestors are actually around us all of the time. They're not off kind of having a party someplace or whatever. But that they are actually doing work on the other side for for themselves, to make themselves well.
Yes.
That was a very new thing for me, and that you kind of sometimes have to get beyond the beliefs that you've grown up with in relationship with this if you want to work with the ancestors.
Right. Well, my cousin Donna, she's down there in the Carolinas, and she's in the chat room with everybody tonight, and she says to me, and she is a world traveler, she's a flight attendant, so she's literally at any given place around Grandmother Earth at any given time. We don't ever really know with her, but she's saying, this isn't anything she was brought up with, I'm so interested in learning more from my ancestors and an altar. This is great info. How can you be sure, though, of inviting of non-ill past relatives? How can you be sure of inviting non-ill past relatives? If Donna were to have a conversation with you about that, Nicole, what would you say to her?
Good question.
It's a good question.
Yeah, I guess I always kind of come back to like intuition, and does it feel safe or does it feel scary?
Right.
And kind of working through, because sometimes things feel scary because it's unknown, we're not quite ready, there's that kind of fear, but then it's just like, ooh, it feels icky, and so I guess I would kind of come back to that.
Okay.
And, looking at to someone how they left their life and what their life lived was like. I mean, like your cousin, Jesse James didn't live the most, pure life. Right. So a lot of,
it was an exciting life, but not necessarily,
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
We don't want to
Preaching
talk to him
hate, or
about
are they
piety.
preaching love? Right. Yeah.
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
Donna, with regard to not inviting, I'll just say that I do have an altar. Some people call altars meditation stations. Other people call their altars contemplation stations. There are many ways of saying it. I just like altar because that's what I grew up with. But, for instance, Donna, I have some just pieces. Well, here's a for instance, Donna. Cousin Wanda gave me some of that beautiful red Georgia clay when I was down there for the family reunion. And so I have a jar of that red dirt sitting there, and I have a beautiful rosary that I purchased in Ireland. Just different things that represent our people. And the reason that I have that there is because it brings my attention back to ancestral land, our connection to Grandmother Earth and our people. But every morning when I walk into my office, I say, "Good morning, relatives. Thank you to my beautiful, wise, intelligent, kind, and loving, illuminated ancestors for being part of my day. Thank you for inspiring me in my work. Thank you for protecting those I love and those that they love." And that's how I approach it. I greet them and I say thank you, because whether I thank them or not, they are with us. Whether we believe it or not, everyone, they are with us. And so I acknowledge them. I acknowledge those that are wise, kind, loving, compassionate, joyful, and well, illuminated. And I invite them to inspire me in my work and in my day and the choices that I make or don't make. And having that altar there, it reminds me all the time that my people are with me. It also reminds me that I am related to Grandmother Earth and the parts of the earth that they came from. So I hope that helped.
Yeah, Denise, and I think that that's a really good way of helping people so that they're not trying to figure out, well, if I put this picture on there, is this a well ancestor or not? Versus you have an object that may remind you of that ancestor. Because when you call forth your ancestors as the well ones, they will come forward. But if you're particularly concerned about one particular ancestor, that's probably a little bit more difficult to determine, are you well or not?
Right.
Certainly you could ask them that question, and it might be really clear. The answer might be really clear, but if it's not really clear, then what are you going to do? That's why I think your idea of putting objects that remind you of your ancestors on a particular area is a great idea.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. All right. Well, it's past the top of the hour. It's been a great conversation. And next month when we get together, we're going to talk about all our relatives. Are we related to places on the earth? Are we related to the cosmos? Are we related really to every living thing? And how do we consider that part of our ancestry? Because, thank you, Carl Sagan. We are what the stars are made of. And our indigenous elders will tell us that our ancestry does go all the way back to the stars. So in my case, Donna, you and I are part Native American, we are African, and we are Celtic. And I can tell you that the African bloodline that runs in our family and our blood, and the Native American, the Seminole and the Cherokee, and the Celtic, way back when the teachings were that we came from the stars, we came from, and we are related to everything. So I think that'll be a great topic for next month. But it's time to sign off. So final word this evening, Cad.
Just thank you all for joining us, and we'll look forward to talking to you next month.
Final word, Nicole.
It's just great to be talking about this. So thanks for being part of our discussion.
I love that. Okay, everybody, get out there and shine as only you can shine. And thank you for joining us tonight. Blessings be, everybody.